we were talking about the 7 traditional liberal arts, the ones used in antiquity and the Middle Ages before modern education started to develop. And then we replaced the classics with the classics and the liberal arts with the liberal arts in the modern sense. And I said that we can demonstrate how they could lead one to authentic philosophizing. We may just use a few examples, one from the trivium and one from the quadrivium. From grammar and from geometry. One of the things that you study in grammar is the declension of nouns. In English, a noun doesn't change its form depending upon whether it's the subject or the object of a sentence. So if I say, I hit Bob, I am the subject, and Bob is the object in that construction, and the verb is hit. The verb may change depending upon singular or plural. Hit, hits. It may depend upon, the subject. But I hit Bob, Bob is the object there. If I say Bob hit me, oh well, in this case it does change the form. Bob is the subject. But I don't say Bob hit I say Bob hit me. The difference between me and I, they're both referring to the first person singular, yours truly. But in one case, in the first sentence, I'm the subject. In the second sentence, I'm the object. Now, Greek and Latin take this further. They are more inflected languages. You've got to change the ending of the noun depending upon the function that it serves in the sentence. There's not only a subject case or nominative and an object case or accusative. There's a vocative case, as when you address someone. There's a genitive case, which has to do with possession. The difference between I and my or mine. There's a dative case and an ablative case, which have to do with directions, like to and from. Now, all of these inflections are not just curiosities and peculiarities of grammar. The ancients believed that they related or described structures within being, we might say, ontological structures. And we know that this is true. Because of the subject, we understood, didn't we, that consciousness which arose because we encountered the other, and by reflection we realised that we are a field of consciousness, has a subject pole and an object pole, and they are distinguishable, although not separate. So the subject and the object case within grammar correspond to inflections within consciousness. We also explained the relativity of consciousness by saying that all I have present to awareness is my tree, or my sky, or my Sydney Harbour Bridge. That's the possessive or genitive case. So we use it all the time when we say my, or your, or his, or hers, or theirs, or ours. That's all genitive. But at the same time, it references the fact that consciousness has this possessive quality to it. Everything within my field of awareness is mine. It's not yours in the sense that it's not present to you, it's present to me. That's what's present. I can have an image of what's going on for you, but what's going on for you is absent to me. It's only represented through the power of my imagination. We also have a sense in which the directions to and from have meaning as well. If we go across to geometry, you'll recall that I distinguished the waking state from the sleeping state, everything being blurred and fuzzy-edged and indistinct in the dream state, and then we wake to a world of hard objects separated in space. And we find that we are positioned, well, I find that I'm positioned at my body. This is my observation station. I look out from my body. There's a from. There's an atness. We talked about prepositions, at, to, from, and so on. There's an atness involved in the structure of being, and an inness, and an interior and exterior, but I'm at my body, and I'm identified with my body in a way I'm not identified with all the other existential entities, all the other entities that form existence. I mentioned also that you can confirm this because if something whacks into that wall, you don't feel it's hurting you directly, but if something whacks into your body, you feel it. Also, you can walk around any object. In theory, you could travel around it in the right vehicle, but you can't walk around your own body because you're attached to it, you're identified with it. It is one with you. I'm not exactly in my body in the sense that a cookie is in a cookie jar, but I'm not external to it, exterior to it, in the way that the furniture in my environment is exterior to me. Now, there is a geometric symbol that captures this, the point. The geometric point is posited as having position without extension. In other words, it is cut off from everything else. It doesn't extend in the same way that I am isolated existentially from other things. I'm separated off. There's a gap. There's a space. Now it's just a mathematical construct, it's an abstraction. As I said, everything in the physical world comes as a 3-in-1 package. Everything's got 3 dimensions, even a subatomic particle. But through geometry, we can break the dimensions down and understand how we construct the world. So the point refers to this existential isolation that is our first vector of pre-reflective awareness. Then I look out, I see the other, but the other isn't a simple entity, because I recognize that the other is looking out. They are an observer. And the moment I recognize that, I realize that what I observe, they don't observe. There's being and non-being. That's absent to me, but this is present to me. And everything that I observe is mine. Now, if it's mine, then every object I look at, an object and subject, they are words that properly pertain to consciousness, not existence, because they are on a continuum. They are part of extension. So geometry says that when you extend the point, you get a line, and a line gives us polarity. And therefore, geometry is actually describing the subject-object duality within consciousness when it talks of the 2-dimensional line, subject-object. A ray is an extension from a certain point, but a line extends in both directions indefinitely. And in between, there's an infinite number of points. You can always, between 2 points, you can always find a third point. And then if you take that third point with the original point, you can find another point in between, and so on, ad infinitum. So you have your line, and that's the polarity within consciousness, the subject-object polarity. Again, it's an abstraction, because there's nothing that is really 2-dimensional like that. There's no 2-dimensional object in the physical world that we inhabit, that I'm coming to you in, that I'm talking to you in, that you're receiving this in. Everything's a 3-in-1 deal. We don't experience the tenses of time either as separate. It's a 3-in-1 deal, past, present, future. But we break this up. We break up a pre-reflective awareness, a reflective, and a post-reflective awareness. And what's this post-reflective awareness? We have to reconstruct reality. We have to come to a notion of reality. It's not the same as the simple view of existence. Now, geometry helps us do this, because we've got a line, and then if we introduce another point that's not on that line, suddenly we have a plane. It's 2-dimensional. It's not on the line. This other point to be comprehended and taken in creates another dimension. And the simplest way to look at, I think, the 2-dimensional plane is to think of the triangle. If you look at my 2 elbows are like 2 points between which is the original line, and then I put another point up that's not on the line. I create another focus. Then I've got a triangle here, haven't I? And it defines a 2-dimensional plane. What does this tell us about the structure of being? Well, if I see the tree and I have a notion of you seeing the tree, an image of it, I can ask, what about the tree in itself? Is there a thing in itself?
It has to be if you're both seeing it.
That's one option. The other option is that it's a collective dream. We have to go slowly here. This triangle, just get this shape of the triangle. We have two eyes and we get stereoscopic vision because the view from each, you have a view if you cover your left eye, you've got a view of everything. And then you cover your right eye, you've got a view of everything. And when you put the two eyes together, the two visual fields coordinate and you have a single vision, a single view. So whether you want to look at it as me and you observing the tree, and there's the third is the tree, but what is the tree? Is it a collective dream? Or is it something out there that's real, independent? Or whether you want to look at it as the actual tree that is present to consciousness. And my image of any number of other observers' tree that is present to their consciousness as I imagine it. You've got two views of the tree. And what brings them together in a unified vision? Well, this can take us from the second dimension of geometry to the third dimension. The minimalist option is that these two views are like two lasers in an interference pattern which can pop out a hologram. You know what I'm saying? Laser light shows can create the illusion of three dimensions. So you can go up and put your hands through the beams and there's nothing there, but it looks solid. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. That's why how they can bring back people from the dead as well.
Oh, I can't go off on that sideline. But just let's
not quite.
let's just say that it's possible to create a hologramic three-dimensional illusion. It's an appearance. And so what I'm saying is the minimalist option is that we stay in two dimensions and it's an appearance. The thing in itself, so-called, is just apparent. It's no thing. It's an appearance, and an appearance is something that is present to consciousness. It enters into the content of consciousness. Whereas the non-minimalist or extra-clad option, let's say, is that the thing in itself is real. What does that mean? It means that it's independent of consciousness. That's what reality is. And it brings me back to that friend that I had at university who used to always make the quip, reality, what a concept. It stayed with me, and then I realised why it had such longevity in my thoughts. It's because reality is a conceptual reconstruction. Somewhat paradoxically, because reality is meant to be independent of consciousness. So that's what I mean by the extra clad option. And when we say that there is a thing in itself that is beyond and independent of the actual and the imaginary views, I have to say that there has to be something substantial out there, which I call matter. It's material. And that takes us to the third dimension. It's the extra clad option that takes us to the third dimension. Now just think of the inflections of being. We've got the inflections of grammar. In grammar are called nouns are declined. There are declensions for the different cases of a noun. Nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, dative, appellative. There's 6 cases, 6 inflections. And verbs are conjugated, depending upon whether they're singular, plural, whatever. But what have we got within the structure of being, which we might call inflections of being? We've got the existential view. Things can be existential. That's on the original pre-reflective view. They can be phenomenal, appearing to consciousness. Phenomena. They could be real, or they could be ideal. That's the minimalist option. Different thought systems approach that differently. When we say something's ideal, when I say something's ideal, I mean it's mental. And when I say something's real, I mean its substance is material. So you've got existential, phenomenal, real, ideal, mental and material. Hey, that's 6 inflections of being. Just when we look at a thing like a tree or a chair, it has ontological inflections. And all of that is encompassed when we say the chair or the tree. Now I use the triangle as a symbol of the 2-dimensional plane. What do we use as a symbol of 3 dimensions? You might be tempted to think of the square, but no, it's still 2-dimensional according to geometry. How about the pyramid? The pyramid's a fascinating shape, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. As soon as we say pyramid, everybody thinks of Egypt.
Yeah, I know.
And the pyramid of Khufu, the Great Pyramid. And they're worth contemplating.
Oh,
because
nobody knows to this day how they were erected. We can't work it out.
But there are certain things that we can just observe by looking at it from a geometrical point of view. A pyramid has a square base. It's not like a tetrahedron which has got a triangular base and triangular sides.
No.
A pyramid has a square base and then it's got triangular sloping sides, hasn't it?
Mm.
So we get something interesting here. We get the 4 is on the base, the 3 in the triangular faces of the pyramid. The 2 is like each edge is where 2 faces meet. And the 1 is the apex at the top of the pyramid, the single point, where all of those edges converge.
Amazing.
So you got 1, 2, 3 and 4. You have there the Pythagorean tetractys, or the Sephirotic tree, the Kabbalistic tree of the Sephiroth. The monad plus the duad plus the triad plus the tetrad gives you the decad, the 10. Might turn that off.
I'm sorry.
I suppose it's worth highlighting, but I know that this is quite dense, but you can go back, re-listen to it, and then let it inspire different lines of research. So it's a three-dimensional thing, the pyramid. The pyramid then becomes a symbol. We could take it as a symbol of everything in the real world. Because we're experiencing a three-dimensional reality. But that three-dimensional reality is decadic. It's tenfold built up of all of those dimensions which aren't manifest. The 1, the 2, the 3 and the 4. Add 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and what do you get? 10. The full manifestation. This is what the Pythagoreans and the Kabbalists are contemplating. How do the numbers, the emanations, give us the full manifestation of the world that we're in? Now, because it's so interesting, I just want to finish with a few thoughts about the Great Pyramid. When people who've investigated it realise that it is orientated north, south, east and west, compass directions. Each side faces a point of the compass. How did they know where these directions were?
There's a lot more to these pyramids than we think. We know that much.
And we know that they are aligned astronomically as well. I don't have time to go into that, but there is a pattern on the ground involving the 3 pyramids on the Giza plateau with the stars of Orion's belt. And just as the stars of Orion's belt are adjacent to the Milky Way, the pyramids are adjacent to the Nile River. So the Milky Way was considered the celestial Nile. So there is an orientation, not just to the directions, the compass points, the cardinal directions on the ground, but also in the heavens. And when you look at the shafts coming up from the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber and how they were positioned on certain stars, one of which was the pole star, Polaris. Another was Thuban in Draco, but these stars also marked celestial compass points as well. And this was just the first layer of their elaborate mythology and religion. So I'm saying that there is an amazing orientation with these pyramids. We'll leave aside the celestial side of it. We'll even leave aside the mystery. There's still mysterious aspects about how they were built. These massive limestone blocks, granite blocks, capped with limestone, but like 2 million.
Oh, there's so many slaves that worked on it for so many years.
But the masonry too, the way they fit together.
The way they fit together,
put a piece of paper between them.
Yeah, just locked in, beautiful, beautifully done. That would have had to be
millions and
mathematically
millions of
worked
tons of perfectly crafted masonry. But
that's right.
I'm just trying to get back to the geometry. The slope, there's an alchemical riddle. You must have heard of it. It's called squaring the circle. One of the things that the fabled alchemists had to do was find the Philosopher's Stone, as in Harry Potter. The Philosopher's Stone would enable you to convert base metals into gold. And it would also confer the power of extending human life. Another alchemical task was to square the circle. how do you square the circle? It was finding a square that was the same area as a given circle. Now the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, squares the circle. It seems to solve the riddle in a way, because the slope of its sides is 51 degrees, 51 minutes, like it's 51 point something degrees, which is 1/7 of a circle which has 360 degrees. But the more impressive feature is that if you take the pyramid, is a scaled down model of a hemisphere of the Earth, which is quite mind blowing, because how did they know the shape and dimensions of the Earth? If you take the perimeter of the base of the pyramid, the distance all the way around the base, and you looked at the vertical height from the apex of the pyramid down to ground level, they are in the same ratio as the circumference of the Earth is to the radius of the Earth. That's why I say that the Great Pyramid is a scaled down model of the Earth, or hemisphere.
Maybe they were a more advanced race.
Maybe they were more advanced in some respects. Maybe they had a different type of learning and a different type of technology and certainly had a different type of civilization. And a lot of people think that the Greeks learnt a lot of this esoteric stuff from the Egyptians. So this is another way in which the Great Pyramid squares the circle. It's on a square base, but it's referencing a spherical Earth. So it's referencing the circumference of the Earth, which is what, about 25,000 miles, 40,000 kilometres, and the radius, which is it 4,000 miles or 8,000? Is it the diameter that's... Anyway, it's the same ratio. I think the radius is about 4,000 miles and the diameter is about 8,000 miles. So it's like 6.4 thousand kilometres and 12.8 thousand kilometres. Now, that means that the pyramid encodes the number that we learn in arithmetic in the quadrivium, the number pi, the sacred transcendental number pi, because pi is the ratio of the diameter of a circle to its circumference. You all remember pi from school, and you can't express it conveniently with a numeral of a finite number of decimal points. It's a transcendental number, so the decimal expansion just goes on and on forever. 3.141519, etc. And it doesn't recur, it's not like a recurring decimal either. The Greeks knew that there were all these different numbers. There were whole numbers and there were rational numbers that could be expressed as a ratio, P over Q, where P and Q were whole numbers, but there'd be something finite in the rational number. And there were these irrational numbers, like the square root of 2 and the square root of 3. We'll see where they come from. They come from a different geometric construction called the vesica Piscis, the intersection of two circles. They knew that they couldn't be expressed as a ratio of P over Q, where P and Q were whole numbers. And then there were the transcendentals like pi. But pi isn't the only transcendental encoded into the Great Pyramid. Remember, it's encoded because if it's referencing the Earth is a sphere, the cross-section is a circle, and so you've got pi involved there in the ratio of the radius to the circumference. Now, if you look at the length of the side of the Great Pyramid, you go up along one of those edges and you compare it to half the length of the base of the pyramid, it gives you another transcendental number, which is key in mathematics. It's called phi, the golden ratio, the golden mean, sometimes associated with Fibonacci. So pi and phi are both encoded into this pyramid. Now, they both tell us something about the nature of being, existence, consciousness, and identity. But because this is a dense subject, and I think we've already gone for 36 minutes, we'll break the video there, and next time we can talk maybe a bit more about sacred geometry before we move on, because it's fascinating.